Welcome. This is going to be a dialogue editing webinar, making great sounds for great games and animation with myself, with the Halp Entertainment Academy. My name is Matt Kulewicz. Thank you for joining us, and I would just want to say thank you to the Halp Network and the Halp Academy. I love you all dearly, and this is fantastic, and I'm super excited that we're doing this. So with today's webinar here, I figured it'd be best to go through and just kind of share what the game plan is, right? So we are going to give you a little bit about me and my background and my journey, because I know I kind of want to talk a little bit about the career path that I'm on and how other people can find this career path, and how you might find yourself in and out of it, or different aspects of what I do, or tangentially. Then we're going to go and talk about the dialogue journey. So I know that we're going to do some dialogue editing later on, but I figured it would be a great idea to talk about the journey from uh, inception to playing, or to viewing, depending on the medium. So I figured I'd just kind of just go through the whole journey that dialogue takes. And then after that, we are going to do some live editing. So I have my handy dandy fancy microphone back here. We're going to actually record a couple lines live and do some editing. And I'll show you my Pro Tools. We're going to look at spectrograms with the Isotope RX. And I'm going to show you that process. And I would love to hear your guys' feedback or questions about that as we go through the live editing. And then after that, we're going to have a Q&A. And, you can save questions for the end, whatever you'd like. So, hello, everyone. Oh, good. The chat is enabled. Awesome. Hello, everybody. Sweet. And lastly, apologize because I have multiple monitors here. So if I'm looking one way or another, that's my camera. But you're all over here, and Pro Tools is over there. So that's going to be the direction my eyes are facing in. Okay, so a little bit about me. How many monitors? Four. I have two and a TV. It's not enough, but two and a TV. So, and is this technique related to ADR dubbing? Well, mainly both, actually, a little bit of both. So and I'll get into that, but we will talk about ADR and dubbing and the differences and things like that, because whether it's for games or for animation, that changes the way you would go about doing that ever so slightly. So a little bit about me. So again, my name is Matt. I am a sound mixer, dialogue designer, recording engineer. I have a lot of hats and labels, but I am a lifelong musician. I've always, from being in high school playing with really cheap PA systems in the basement of churches and bands in high school, to going to college. I got my bachelor's in music industry back in New York in SUNY Oneonta. Oh my God, I started that about 20 years ago. Oh boy. And throughout my time at my undergrad, I was learning and working in audio production and getting to work in the studio. And their student studios 20 years ago were fantastic for the time, and really got to experiment a lot, which was great, and we'll get into that more. But to continue, after I graduated my undergrad, I was interning at a lot of studios. I toured with some groups and was their recording engineer and sound engineer, as most people do in my line of work. At some point, you work at Sam Ash or Guitar Center, so you're familiar with all the latest tech and everything like that. I actually took a brief stint out of audio to work in IT in my mid-20s. I had my quarter-life crisis where I felt I needed to have a salaried career, and IT was the way to do that, because I was an IT technician in my undergrad and my graduate school. So I decided to switch out of audio for a while, and then after doing IT for a while, said, no, 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 quarter life crisis over. I need to do what I'm passionate about, and it was in the world of audio. So I applied and got into NYU, the Steinhardt School of Education and Culture, and I got my master's degree from there in music technology. And while at NYU, I also studied, became a Tonmeister, and studied everything within that world, and also worked at the studio at NYU, and fell in love with film sound. So from my NYU courses and meeting everybody and collaborating with the Tisch Film School and the scoring department and all the different music and film TV departments. I ended up working on a lot of indie film projects. There's a huge indie film scene in New York, and I have a lot of dear friends who I still work with and connect with and talk to as much as I can today. I ended up getting connected to some editors and producers and work on some PBS stuff. So a lot of stuff in New York PBS. I got to work on a number of documentaries where I got to cut my teeth on restoring and cleaning bad audio, especially when you get to historical documentaries, let's say from the 50s and 60s. You know, the audio it's tricky. So I got to really cut my teeth on audio restoration and fixing bad audio, and finding the balance of when it's okay that you don't want to fix audio from the 1930s and make it sound like it was recorded on a $10,000 microphone yesterday. There's a balance there, but I got to cut my teeth there. Got to work on cooking show. If everyone's Italian grandmother knows who Lydia Bastianich is, I got to work on the her show, which is Lydia's Kitchen. So I got to work on cooking shows. Now again, a lot of dialogue cleaning. So I really got to do a lot. My training, so to speak, is mostly around dialogue and all this. Anyway, that led to starting to work in animation, and through my tech background, I got hired by The Late Show to help build the studios for our cartoon president, which became our cartoon president with Stephen Colbert and The Late Show, and ended up not only building the studios but then running the studios and pretty much being the head of that show for, oh my god, 4 years. 4 years. And we did 3 seasons of television, which segue includes a remote season. Speaking of restoring and cleaning audio and in dialogue, I was in New York in March of 2020. I was there. And I had the opportunity to basically build an entire audio workflow remotely, pretty much myself, and got to run that department for a season of animation. And that was a challenge, but that was a fast well, let me tell you this, the and as we get into dialogue and anything in this career, I befriended so many actors and so many casting directors and voiceover directors. I love everyone that I get to work with, and I really found a passion for working in dialogue and working in animation through this. Yes, Lawrence, this is a bit of a documentary, and I will segue into actual editorial stuff shortly. After that, I started working more in animation, working more with a Warner Brothers. I worked on Space Jam 2, which was peak pandemic as well. So I was lucky enough to record all the Looney Tunes characters remotely, and I can spend hours talking about those stories, but it was a journey, and I loved every second of it and loved everybody I got to work with. And from there through, which I will talk about in terms of, let's talk about it now. Something that is very important in my journey is the relationships you foster. And so it doesn't matter who it is, you'll be surprised where one, work will come from, and two, you surround yourself with super talented, super cool people, and it's amazing the things that they'll do in their career. And if you are also in that pool of passionate about what you do and always trying to do better and better yourself and better your work, you will find that they want you along for the ride. And so I was very fortunate in my journey that when I got to do these projects from Late Show with Cartoon President, and then getting to work on Space Jam, and that led me to working at Riot Games on the Arcane series, and I did that for 2.5 years, and that's what kind of segued to me moving out to Los Angeles. So that was an incredible journey, and I was so fortunate. I love the people I work with. I love the Riot team. I love the Arcane team. I'm so happy that season 2 has been announced, and I won't say much, but I will say look forward to that. So, and now I'm basically freelancing with many studios at once right now. I'm kind of like an all over the place kind of guy. I've been working with Sony on the dialogue team on their mocap stages. I've been doing some editorial work with them, and those guys and girls are all amazing. I love the Sony dialogue team and all the different things we do over there, and a number of another number of studios on a number of other AAA games and other types of games where I'm doing a lot of dialogue editorial. So the past couple of years, 2, 3 years, has been mostly game based. So at this point, my focus and experience is, I'd say, 80% dialogue focus, and then the 20% is I still do music editing and producing, still working on sound design and everything like that, but mostly dialogue. So that's why I think it's great that we're doing this dialogue editing seminar. So yes, that's kind of me in a nutshell, um, professionally speaking. So that being said, the what I'm going to do is I want to talk about the dialogue journey that dialogue takes, and then we'll get into the editing specific. But I think it'll be nice to talk about dialogue and as well as some of the career options that you can find along that journey. I'm very lucky that I got to wear many hats and do most of these steps and still do, but it's I think it's kind of cool to see what's out there and in this field. And you'll find too is that this field, the family is smaller than you think. I love everyone I get to work with, and you will find that outside of the idea of good work behests good work, the people, you will find connections more ways than you think, working in this industry, and especially because it's such a tightly knit community and family, and I'm just gonna gush over it for an hour. So the dialogue journey. The first things first, we're going to be talking about two different things here, and that's the difference between animation and the difference between gaming. So animation, it's still a lot of voice actors do both animation and gaming. Some do one or the other, but there's a big gray area between the two. But I want to make sure we differentiate what those two things are so that when we get to talk to the editing and maybe the journey that dialogue takes, where those differences lie. So, animation is linear. It's got a start and a finish, right? It's something you ingest by watching it. It's something that it's linear in that it's the path and the mix and the visual experience is set. That is created and prefabricated, and you just watch it top to bottom. Gaming, on the other hand, is also known as interactive. So while there are linear elements to games like cutscenes and things like that, or pre-scripted events that happen in games, in general, it's up to you, the player, to decide your player experience. And so the way you have to approach certain techniques or certain qualities of audio or treatments of audio, it can change depending on when you're working in a more linear animation world or in an interactive gaming world. So let's see here. Let's start with the first things first, right? Obviously, first things first, someone has an idea, right? But let's talk about in the realm of audio and in dialogue. Specifically, you have pre-production. So before any actors in a booth, before you hit record on anything, you have pre-production. Now, what does that mean? That means scripting. That means casting. That means and everything in between with booking talent, finding studios, and then on the creative side, and this is more prevalent in gaming. What's the goal here? What's the story? How do we capture this? What do we need? So, for instance, I got to work on so let's say, in a game where you have NPCs and you have a main character and you have cutscenes and stories and a journey that this character takes, deciding what kind of efforts and sounds you need for the character, let's say walking animations or interactions with NPCs and how that conversation will progress or how things change, or if the intent on the character's journey so that maybe they sound different from the start of the game to the end of the game. That's also very relevant in animation, how a character can start sounding one way, but by the end, they can sound, in the very beginning, they can sound full, broad-chested, and confident, and by the end they can be beleaguered and weak, and that journey that someone gets to get there. And so you have to kind of plan that, because when you get into the booth, when you get to the recording and the editing and the mastering and the implementing process, you want to have those things determined, right? So that's where you have a lot of work put into that, with casting, with scripting, with pre-dialogue design. You get into the music and sound effect design. All those aspects come into play before you even get into a booth, because the last thing you want is to go into a recording session and go, all right guys, we're rolling, what are we recording? What do you mean, what are we recording? I don't know, you tell me. So you want to have that worked out ahead of time. So let's say we have all that worked out. We got some amazing actors, we got some amazing voice directors, we got the best studio in town, we have everyone ready to go, and everyone knows the story and the characters and the motivation and the style, and the type of performance we're getting, and we're ready to record. Now, this is more of a thing that is very much still the case today, but what I do a lot of is I do a lot of remote recording. So you have the in studio and you have remote records. What I dubbed the lifers of voice acting, a lot of them have, almost bunker type situations. They have their booth, they have their studio bricks, they have their spaces set up, and it's up to the studio that is working on the project to connect with those actors or with the agents to make sure that you get the right quality, that the specs that the studio needs, that you've vetted the space with the actor, all those things that are done. That's part of the pre-production. So certain tools that you need to know how to use in the recording situation that will benefit you in the dialogue editorial phase. Understanding your signal flow. As an engineer as someone who edits a lot of dialogue and edits both in studio and in studio and remote dialogue, I get the source audio from actors all the time, and it's very important to make sure it's easy to get the dialogue and to have that data. So having your computer organized, having yourself organized is super important, so you can easily pull stuff down and share it out if you need to, and being able to make sure you keep the highest quality of the audio in relation to you don't want to have the remote audio and the in-studio audio sound completely different. Real quick, Source Connect, the standard or their viable alternatives? Source Connect I would say, is the standard. I have Source Connect. There are other ones. There is IPTTL, there is Audio Movers, Listen To, and each of them have different, there's like, then when you get into ADR, there's Evercast, and there's other tools like that. Riverside, yes. So there are other tools available, and I won't say there's one end all, this is the right one. It depends on the scenario. From my experience, if you're working with an actor and you just are remote recording, Source Connect, you can't go wrong. A lot of studios will use IPDTL, especially studios that do ADR sessions, because I've done remote ADR sessions where like 8 actors are dialing in to one studio, and IPDTL is great for having the multiple connections. But Source Connect is great for a single one-way connection for that high-quality audio. So again, the different tools, depending on the situation, the type of recording session that you're doing. Like I said, ADR, you have to get with ADR and with dubbing and things like that. Now you have video elements, so that's where something like Riverside or something like Evercast is a better tool, because then you can see the sync and things like that. That being said, I've done ADR just straight on Pro Tools, no problem, with my workflow, but everybody's different, every production is different. So you kind of have to see what the needs are of that product. Is there an infograph of these? There probably is. I don't personally have one. If I happen to find one, I can definitely share it, but maybe do some live Googling a little later. But I don't personally have one offhand that I can share. Let me think about that as we go along. So another thing to consider, especially very important, is that having your foundations, having your basics, the fundamentals of science, the fundamentals of sound, especially as an audio engineer, no matter what aspect of the audio industry you're in, having the fundamentals of knowing, your signal flow, knowing the fundamentals of microphones. If you're going to be recording and working professionally with microphones, it would be nice to know if you had one of those exploded parts of a microphone, you can say this is the coil, this is the diaphragm, this is, you know, this is where the XLR cable gets plugged in. This is the capsule. This is things like that. Because especially when you work remotely or with multiple studios, you can work in, the same studio, you can work in the same microphone, the same actor in different but in different studios, it might sound slightly different. So you have to consider that when you're recording, as well as especially when you're editing and getting onto the mastering and whatnot process. So, um, you know, standard mics these days, the U87 with the Sennheiser 416. I have both of those here. I have my Manley mic, for different purposes. So there's different tools for the job. There's the Sanken mic, which is there's certain microphones like that one that's good for if you're doing a lot of vocal processing later on. So you might want to record at a higher sample rate or higher bit rate, so that when you do the processing, you have more information that you can affect the dialogue and doesn't degrade it as much as if you record it at a lower audio quality. Sip time. Okay, so you have your recording session, right? And I'm going to show a little bit of that too once I share my screen and show you a couple things in Pro Tools. But you recorded everything. You recorded everything. You have all the takes. You have a script. You have selects and things like that pulled. It's very important to make sure, again, keeping organized. I've been in gigs where you have to both be the audio engineer and the note taker, but I've also been in many productions where you have someone whose job it is to take notes, which is super helpful for someone like me, so that I can focus on listening to the quality of the audio and things like that. And I don't have to focus on, was that 16A or 16B, or are we on take 12? I don't know. So it's good to have those notes and have them organized. Once you have that, it's time for an editor to come into play. Haha, it took 24 minutes. Now we're going to talk about editing. So things to consider when you are receiving in data from a studio, from whoever, as a dialogue editor. This pertains to any kind of audio editing, but we're going to talk about specifically dialogue editing. So the things that I need to get in order to start editing, I need obviously the audio, right? Usually, if it's in studio, everything can be self-contained in a Pro Tools session. Pro Tools is our industry standard, which I don't see that changing anytime soon, but being aware and being versed or knowing how to navigate things like Reaper, things like Logic are very useful. Reaper is coming up in a lot of game audio. I've seen some places, especially, so just to touch on the Reaper thing for a second, the Reaper is very friendly when it comes to the programming side of things. So especially in game audio, it's something that it's easy to work with the middleware and to work with the programming, as opposed to it's a little more friendly to that, because I think of Reaper as like the Linux of DAWs, so to speak. So I've seen people that rely on Reaper, and so not only being able to work in Reaper, but knowing how to, let's say you have a Pro Tools session and you need to get it into Reaper, and vice versa. How would you do that, right? As someone who works a lot in indie films and animation, I get films that were exported in DaVinci Resolve, in Adobe, in Adobe Premiere, in all the different Avid Media Composer, all the different video editors, and so you have to know how to at least navigate in and out of them. Not be a professional in all of them, but that's why for me, someone like me, I have Pro Tools I can blindfold me right now, I'll get a session going. But for other DAWs, I can work with them, I can mix in them, but it's not as important to be an expert in all of them. DaVinci and Resolve and Audacity, yes. So something that is Audacity and is a free DAW. It's great for remote recordings. You usually need a quick thing. Just open up Audacity, hit record. You can do any sample rate, and it's very easy to connect. It's very plug and play friendly. Definitely recommend Audacity in a pinch for that if you're working with someone, or you are someone who needs to record something in a pinch. I will say, Adobe Audition, Adobe Audition, well, the one trick, Sam, is that Adobe Audition costs money. and Audacity does not. But I definitely agree with you there. Okay, so we have our audio, and completely lost track of what I was talking about. We get the audio for the source from the to get the editorial process. So we get the audio. Yes. The next thing is the script. We know what takes and selects that we need. That is again. The last thing you want is to be making guesses, right? Especially if there's a in games, usually it's pretty easy to see line one, they did take A and B, we like B. Line two, we did take A and B, we like A. Line three, it's very, the actors who have done it a lot and the voice directors who have done it a lot usually have a good rapport, so it's easier to edit audio like that. But then you have sometimes you have a tricky scene, or you have someone who's done more film and not as many games, or maybe the dialogue changed last minute. So it can be challenging to try to untangle that mess if you don't have good notes. You were talking about the scripts and selects. Yes. So having the scripts and selects and the notes. Yes. Okay, good. So I am on the right track. Cool. So we have that all set up. And the next thing you're going to want to do when we edit, I'm going to show you the lot. Again, we're going through this and I'll show it live, but there's things you do like checking for any pops or clicks, volume normalization. Every game, every film has a different specs. Usually, in the end, it's all mostly the same, but every game, every gaming company, every production will have different specs you need to be careful of. The pops, clicks, mouth and throat noises, which those are sneaky. The when you're cleaning and editing, you want. It's funny. All the dialogue that we have in all these games are recorded on microphones, but the last thing you want to hear when you play a game is dialogue that sounds like it was recorded on a microphone, which is I think like I always say, the best sound design goes unnoticed. No one's gonna watch a film or play a game and go, "Oh man, the ADR on that second line was fantastic," right? So no one's unless it's someone like me, but 99% of the people are not going to call that out, right? You'll say, "Oh, the visual effects were amazing and the acting was amazing," but you won't say, "Oh, the sidechain compression they used on the low end of that one sound effect was so great." No one's going to say that. So, so therefore, when you are listening and editing, you need to be cognizant of that in the dialogue form. You don't want it to sound like that. And that's where, as an editor, even as a recording engineer, the difference of microphone techniques, of how far you are from the microphone and things like that, and how loud or quiet, how much gain there is. So yes, that's especially as we get into the wide world of podcasts. It's the Wild West out there, in terms of audio quality and compression, lack of compression, how many plosives there are in there. And let's see here. Helen, yes, I primarily use RX. I make the joke often that when we look at a spectrogram, it's like the matrix code. I don't even see the code anymore. I can kind of, because I look at RX every day of my life. So that is my golden standard. There are other programs like that, but as far as I go, I would call RX the gold standard of that. So the pops, click, mouse, throat noises, and something just as important is naming and exporting. Now, this is kind of like the businessy kind of paper pushing side of it, but you're editing all these lines. I sometimes have to edit hundreds and hundreds of lines. And sometimes for some games, let's say certain fighting games or action games, you have 10 of the same sound. I need 10 low grunts, 10 medium grunts, 10 loud grunts, right? You want to make sure each one of those grunts are labeled correctly. So let's say 10 low, medium, high. That's 30 different grunts. So you need to make sure that the specs are correct for, are they the correct length? Are they the correct volume? Are they the correct name and in the sequential order? Because let's say the actor recorded 20 of each, and they very specifically, the game designers or the voice directors want very specific ones. So it gets, yeah. And what's kind of funny is that the amount of effort that gets put into a game to make it feel so realistic is like, if I'm playing a game and it is a fighting game, I might not hear every or if it's like a narrative story, I might not hear the medium grunt number 4 or loud grunt number 7 ever in my playthrough. And so you have to be careful with that. Do all one word labeling or use underscore? Does it depend? Usually labeling is predetermined, especially when it comes to game audio. It's usually 100%. I've never seen a game that does not have predetermined labeling, because the labeling affects the middleware, it affects the code of the game, the way the game reads the audio. So that is very particular. When it comes to animation, usually yes, and usually there's like there's a gold standard of, like, show code, season, episode, scene, character. There's like a way you can kind of go down the breakdown of, like, the from highest tier to lowest tier detail of that. So if you don't have any instructions, let's say, on an animation project, I usually go to that kind of the simplest thing possible, so that the idea is, no matter who you give this to, they can go, oh, that makes sense, yep, here's the script, here's the notes, I see the labeling, yep, that's episode 2, that's line 35, got it. So that's it. But with gaming, there it's very specific. um Sip again, please. Yes, in certain codes it does matter. Yeah, I usually, as a rule of thumb, I never use spaces in any of my names of files, just underscore it. That's always a safe way to do it. So yes. But again, when you are done, the work that you do as an editor, you're handing it off to somebody else, and you want it to be, I'm not calling anyone an idiot, but you want it to be idiot proof. You want it to be, anyone can look at that audio, anyone can get that delivery from you, and you can be like, can I read? Yes. Do I understand how to count to 10? Yes. Okay, this makes sense to me, right? So it's very, very important to make sure that you have that in a way so that it doesn't diminish the quality of your work. You can just hand it off, and it's the right structure and naming nomenclature. So after the editorial process, what happens next? QC and mastering is usually the thing that happens next. Now, again, this depends on whether it's more linear, like animation, or gaming, the interactive, because this leads to the last step, which is delivery and implementation. But let's take animation first, right? Animation, whether it's film or TV, you have your final mix, right? The gold, final mix, and it goes out to theater, streaming, YouTube, whatever. But because it's linear, you can mix and pop it in a timeline and balance it out and have that fine tuning process where you're able to finesse everything and put the effects on and put the balance in there and create that soundscape. So there are different parameters you need to consider when doing that. But for gaming, it's completely different, because again, it's interactive. It depends on the type of sounds. Is this a dialogue line? Is this a grunt? Is this a scream? What kind of character is this? There's a game that I was working on that, ah, localization. We'll touch on localization a little bit, because I've done some dialogue editing for Japanese. I've done dialogue editing for Spanish, another language. You have to consider too the what kind of vocal processing is going to be put on that audio. So, for instance, if you are doing localization for a game, or you have a series of characters, let's say um, a it's a military game, or there's police officers or something, and they all have helmets, right? And they have the helmet audio like this, right? So you need to make sure that no matter what language it's recorded in, why you have those specs is that if you put Cantonese, you put Japanese, you put Spanish, you put French, you put German, you put English, it's going to have the same helmet effect in implementation. So you're not recreating the wheel for each language and things like that. It allows you to make sure that you can change languages and you can implement a different language, and it seamlessly has the same, so the player in this case has the same experience. In linear, in animation, very much the case. So, but again, it's more of like in this case, you'll get stems and a mix to do that too. So it's a little more of a puzzle piece, pop it in kind of thing, as opposed to game, which you have to do the prep work ahead of time. Um, and let's see. Lastly, too, with the QC and mastering, depending on with games, you have in-game dialogue, and then you also have cutscene dialogue. Usually the cutscenes are synced to picture. So sometimes where a piece of dialogue that's an in-game piece of dialogue might just be a triggerable WAV file that just starts to finishes, but in a cinematic it might be printed similar to an animation where you have like stems, right? Where everything is printed along the line. So in the QC and mastering, it'll be lined up to the visuals, more like an animation. Um, is it more difficult to tonal languages and the effects? Yeah, intonation, emotion, different languages and different cultures show emotion and express certain emotions differently. When I was working on the always got to be careful what games I'm talking about. When I was working on the released game, not going to be in trouble, the released game Exoprimal with the amazing folks at the Help Network, and working with the Capcom team in Japan and the voice director and everybody to say, okay, here's the Japanese line, here's the direct translation of the Japanese line. We need the English actor to say that line, and the direct translation doesn't make any sense because maybe there's a Japanese word to express something about a piece of technology or an intention that in English doesn't translate well, so you have to change the wording around to make it fit. And so it come, or anyone that can speak any kind of Japanese knows that that if you have an English is like, oh my god, look over there, and I'm not going to attempt to translate that to something, but I know in Japanese can be like, huh, a grunt or something like that. That can be the line, right? So it changes the length of things, the intention behind what kind of sound that is when you have a whole line like that. So that means different things in different languages. So you have to consider that when recording for localization. And then kind of touched on that lastly with delivery and implementation. Something that I've been working on a bit now, which is kind of the next evolutionary phase of my career, is I've been working more with Wise. So anyone that works in game audio will know what Wise is. Things like Fmod, Unreal Engine, that's what happens when the audio is done and you're implementing it, and that's where the audio can be tested and actually put into the game. And that's where having that nomenclature, that aforementioned nomenclature, is super important. So Wise is a lot of fun. So now that I have spent way too long talking about all this to now, I want to switch gears. Does anyone have any questions? Because I'm about to switch to do some live in-studio editing. So I want to make sure if anyone has any questions about that kind of process with the dialogue. Again, I know this is a super quick 1 hour little webinar. And each little thing that I have in my little notes I can spend like an hour each talking about. So I like sponges. Thank you, Brittany. Okay, awesome. So what I'm going to do is I am going to do some live editing with you guys. I'm going to share my screen. Famous last words. I'm going to share my screen, and let's try doing that. Share sound, desktop. Great. Let me make sure I have the chat window up. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? I just want to make sure if I get a thumbs up or a yes, I want to make sure everyone can see my screen and still hear me. Excellent. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so here's my good old Pro Tools. I have Isotope open over here, which we will look in a minute. But now the next thing I'm gonna get. Oh, I realized that was on the whole time. Gonna swing this guy around. So, and I know I tested this before, but I'm gonna test it real quick right now. Here I am in my other mic. I sound a little quieter, right? But you can still hear me? Yes. Okay, cool. Excellent. So I'll turn that off. Excellent. So yes, it's going to be a little delayed because I have the buffers in. So what I'm going to ask, and I'll do a couple of them, but I need someone to give me a quote from a television show or a film, a classic quote from a television show or a film, because I'm going to recreate that quote and I'm going to edit that with you guys. So I just need like the first couple ones I see if I get a good one. Okay, let's see if I can get a couple different quotes. But I'm going to do this live, and I want to do some takes. We're going to record a couple takes. Cool. Okay, so I have a couple. We're going to start with the first one that I saw. Excellent. Okay, we have some good ones here. I'm very happy. Here we go. So I'm going to record myself, switch mics again, so we'll have a little bit of delay. And I'm going to start with the first one. I see some good ones. So don't be mad if I don't pick your line, because there's a lot of great lines. I was quoting myself. There's 1,000 fun lines we can come up with. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to record myself. We're going to watch the waveform, right? That's why I have this here. You can see how it sounds and looks when it gets recorded. And then we will edit it and talk about it. So here we go from putting myself on the spot. Make sure I have my levels correct. Yep, that's a good level. It's a good professional sound check. Here we go. Where's the line go? Oh, God, I lost the line. Nope, I got it. Okay. Dear God, Fraser, it's only labeled wine. Dear God, Fraser, it's only labeled wine. Dear God, Fraser, it's only labeled wine. All right. So, switch mics. And mic switched. Okay. So, right, I did 3 takes. You can see how wildly different those 3 takes look, right? And let's say, God forbid, someone says, "Oh, that second take. Can you please give me that second take?" Right? So, let me just go up and down with the waveform so you can see what it looks like a little bit, right? So, I'm gonna play it back now that I have it recorded. This should be a decent volume for you all. Dear God, Fraser, it's only labeled wine. Dear God, Fraser, it's only labeled wine. Dear God, Fraser, it's only labeled wine. Okay. So, now in terms of levels, Lawrence, now that is a tricky situation. That's going to be a spec situation. When you talk about industry standard for animation, narrative, television, and film, you have the -24 LUFS. And in gaming, it's different. Don't get me into music and streaming. It's a whole nother set of worms. So that's something you have to know ahead of time and get those specs ahead of time so you're not making assumptions. Now, when you're recording, I usually don't have to worry about the levels yet. It's really editing and the QC and mastering that have to worry about the levels. But my kind of rule of thumb is when recording, I try to get it between -12 to -18 dB. Basically, you want something to have enough headroom so that if someone gets super big, that they have room to go, but it's also not too quiet, because if you record something too quietly, then when you bring it up and level it, you're raising the noise floor as well. So you want to have that balance of being recorded loud enough, but not too much so. There's actually a trick with Pro Tools that this is the standard volume of a track, so anyone that uses Pro Tools, you can make tracks go higher. This is not making anything louder and quieter. This is just visually how it looks, right? So I usually do a trick where if I make it 2 clicks higher and I use the top and bottom, right? The top and the bottom of this field, that's roughly -20 dB. So if let's say, let's take this, move this out of the way. So if I take this line right here and I just make this like see how the peaks are about at the top there? It can go a little above, a little below. And then I measure this. Makes a fool out of me. Let's see. 24 LUFS. So it's about 24. Again, it's not perfect. For me, it's a visual thing. So that's usually kind of how, when I'm editing, of course, I need the meters to tell me in the end to make sure I'm correct. But if I'm eyeballing something and just cleaning something up, I want to make sure it's at least in a ballpark to start with. So that's what I usually do. So let's say take 2, that's our winner. First thing that we want to do is, the first thing we do is, let's say we have 2 hours long worth of audio. The first thing I usually do is I want to look at the spectrogram. Before I do anything, I want to look at the spectrogram. So we're going to send it to RX. So this is what a spectrogram looks like. Again, I don't even see the code anymore. You can see here from bottom to top, the bottom is the lower frequencies, the top is higher frequencies. So here, 0 hertz up to over 20,000 hertz, right? And the brightness, left to right is time, right? Linear. But the brightness, so from the dark blue and black, which is quieter sounds, to the white and yellow, which is the louder sounds, and the orange is kind of the middle ground. So that's the color palette. So we do have, make sure that I am connected here. Yes, RX is connected. Good. So when I play this, it should play for you guys. Okay, so you guys can see that on RX, and you can hear it as well. No audio. Aha! It didn't play for us. Well, that is because I did this. So now it should play. Try it now.
Dear God, Fraser, it's only labeled wine. Dear God, Fraser, it's only labeled wine.
Can you hear it now? I want to make sure you can. Good, awesome, yes. So, first thing I do when I receive it is the first thing I do is when I look at it and I can see in someone's studio, especially even if it's a professional studio, the first thing I look at is patterns. So something I notice if I look at the lower spectrum here, I can blow it up and I can see in this room, this is not a booth, this is just an office room. Down here, right, if you see here 60 hertz and below, there's a low end little rumble, right? I got my computer right here, I have my patch bay and everything there. You know, this isn't double pane windows, it's the outsides right there, right? So that's why I have a little bit this low end. So something that I like to do is well below the threshold of the lowest part of the voice. You can see here, right, the waveforms of a voice and its harmonics. This is here, the bass. If I just play this, those the fundamental and the first couple harmonics of my voice there. So you never want to remove any of that. But below 60 hertz, think of someone playing on like their AirPods in a mobile game. No one's going to hear below 60 hertz. And so, yes, it sounds muffled because I was only playing the lower frequencies. Whenever I highlight in this little faded square and hit play, it only plays that. So if I played up here,
Dear God, Fraser,
if I play this, I'm playing the higher frequencies, right? So I'm going to take out and I'm going to use something like this. This is like a deplosive. I might say, okay, the lower frequencies, right? And if you're not on headphones, you might not hear it. So I see these, everything below here. I see it's about 50. So I'm going to just take out some of those plosives, right? And this is what I would do to the yeah, what's like dogs here, some lower frequencies. Yes. So that's, again, this is a preventative cleanup. This is a before you even get to the nitty gritty. And then I might do something very simple where I take an EQ way below it. So I want to get rid of this little hump right there. Might do something like this. I usually don't do any sort of EQing above 60 or 70 hertz because that's when the human voice, especially low male voices, start to come in. And if you do that as a blanket cleanup, you'll start to remove some of the low end, some of the oomph and body of the human voice. You never want to do too much. Something like this, especially in editing, is something you can always do more later, right? Okay, so we've edited our whole 2-hour file. I'm going to ship this back. And you'll see here, what's kind of cool is when you blow up the waveform, I'm going to render it. And it just changes the waveform ever so slightly. So I'm going to now show you, I'm going to put the grid mode on and show time code in one frame. In games especially, you want to be very tight. So the first sound to last sound, if I zoom in, right, the line was
Dear God.
Dear God. You can see the D, the D right here, right? Start. So you want to clean up the dialogue and not can be you don't want to ever clip off part of the dialogue, but you want to be very close to it. This is now, you can see the little gray line, that's less than a frame. So I'm going to take that out. And then the tail, you want what's called a natural tail. So because we want take two, you want to hear the
labeled wine.
The wine. Yeah, I had the N in there. So I'm going to just make it louder for a second. If I cut out the bit of the tail right there, it'll sound cut off.
Wine.
Make it even louder.
Bold wine.
So you can hear the cut
Bold
off.
wine.
So what I want to do is I want to give it a natural, and I might, yeah, the N. So I might blow it up. You can see where it kind of ends like that little mouth click right there. And I might do that. So if I do this and then play it, and I'm going to make it louder so we can hear the N.
Bold wine.
There you go. So now it sounds more natural, right? So now that I got the ins and outs, I'm going to do the most important thing here, which is the normalization, because no one speaks like this. So, but you want to have that life, but you don't want to kill the life, but you also, I have to turn the volume up and down with lines are too dynamic, right? Too loud versus too quiet. So I'm going to do, what I usually do is I do a balance. So I see these peaks right here. I might lower the peaks a little bit. Now you can do this with a compressor. I personally don't, because I like the natural touch, because you don't need it for every line. I'm going to do this. I'm going to highlight here and bump it up a little bit. I'm going to bump it up. So you see I'm what's using called clip gain to do this real quick. I'm doing a super quick because I know I'm talking, as I predicted, way too long on other topics. So I'm going to play this now, and you're going to see it's going to be a little better.
Dear God, Fraser, it's only labeled wine.
Versus if I do it original, it's
Dear God, Fraser, it's only labeled wine.
you can feel the me going back and forth, so I actually want to maybe bring it up a little more. But you do, ooh, that's not more, that's less. So might bring it up a little more. But again, if you do too much, let's match. Let's match the waveform. Let's go freaking crazy right now, right? Let's see what kind of beast I created by doing this. Right? You're like, oh, well, if it's all the same volume, it's all even, right? Let's see.
Dear God, Fraser, it's only labeled wine.
Nice and natural, right? So part of editing is finding that middle ground where you're not making it perfect, but you're splitting the diff. You're making it so that it's not distracting to listen to. So I, in many cases, have many great takes of selects, and it's like that was the take, that was it, that was the moment. But the guy, the actor pulls away for a second, or they go pah, and there's a big plosive or something like that. So as an editor, it's up to you to clean that so it's not distracting as you listen to it. So that, wow, I really realized an hour has gone super quick. So some tricks that I do, just so you guys know, I'm going to show you real quick. I sometimes put a compressor on when I'm editing, so that during I'll put a compressor on it, so that what happens is that it kind of enhances the good and the bad. So if I hear extra pops and clicks, the compressor kind of puts the bad stuff forward for me, so I can hear them more prevalent. They're more in my ears, so that when I clean it, if I don't hear the pops and clips and bumps and throat noises in the edit, even with the compressor on, when the compressor's off, obviously won't hear anything. So I'm kind of like being overly cautious, right? So let me do that normally. The other thing to look out for, if I'm going to send it back to RX, let's see what pops and clicks look like. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and here we go. So if I see,
Dear God, Fraser, it's only labeled wine.
okay, so like something like this. See this little guy right there? I heard that little click. I'll play just the click. Actually, let's play just the click. There you go. So that's something that I hear, and I can...
Labeled wine.
The duh of labeled, this is the D of the label, the duh. But labeled, I don't need this extra click here, so I can use a declicker. I'm going to show you what it looks like when it goes away, but that's what it looks like when it goes away. But that's something like, where's my declicker? I have a whole bunch of shortcuts, but mouse declick. Oh my goodness, you were just there. Something like this. You have different. So I'll use as a tool to help clean that up. Jeff, the compressor I like to use recently, I've been a FabFilter fan, and I use their standard vocal style. So it's a 4:1 ratio. It's a 4:1 ratio. That if I remember correctly, yeah, it's a 4:1 ratio, and it has a -18 threshold. So basically anything that's low enough, it brings it up. And I don't need to be like super compressed, just more compressed than natural. So again, it makes things stand out more. And let me see, anything else I wanted to kind of super quick mention. I can get into recording and talking about dropping markers in Pro Tools, and pulling out selects and comping. There's certain tricks you can do, like if something says, if the if I say the sound of something, can I have let's see, can I have 2 sandbags, please? Or please, and the S is too long. You can actually do a trick where you can actually cut the S, is like a white noise, but very short. You can actually cut the S short to save time and everything. Yes, the class is being recorded, Jacob. So it'll be, my ramblings will be available on the internet through the Help Network. So yes, unless you're Cobra Commander. So something you can do tricks like that. If a line's too long, or it's too, it was a great take, but they just ended too short. You can also use the S to say if the S was cut off. You can also add an S to kind of do as a little trick. Let's see. Quick one thing I'll say is, aside from that pre-cleanup that I did that I showed you in the beginning, if you have a long file, try not to do any batch processing, because you'll find that it might, especially with like declicking or deplosives or whatever, you still want to listen to everything one at a time, because you will find that it might take away a P or a T or something like that. So if I say something's important, right, versus something's important, you're importing, what important, right? So things like that you have to be careful for with batch renaming or batch processing. So that's where it's very careful not to do that. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share because I will talk for the next hour and a half. But I wanted to say I'm going to try to answer all your questions. But best plugins for dialogue editing essentials. I do like so my normal editing rig is with Pro Tools. I use the Fab Filter compressor. Even the built-in compressor is great in Pro Tools just for something. I like Ozone as well. Ozone is another isotope plugin, and then Isotope RX as my go-to cleaner. That's for me industry standard. Um, Advice for making connections in the industry when you're new. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I will say that. I'm gonna say answer live. Oh, cool. I can do that. Um, so it's when I was in grad school, I was able to make friends, and not with expectations of anything. Just like, hey, you make cool stuff. I want to make cool stuff. You're the video guy, or you wrote it. I can make it sound good, and I was very lucky that I got to work with enough people like that. That's how I got recommended. Like I can draw a path of how like some things I got a job out of something and that became a dead end, but then I got recommended to someone else and that got recommended to someone else and yada yada yada. This industry is so much smaller than you think, and it's good work behests good work, and earning someone's trust, earning a studio's trust, a producer's trust, an actor's trust is super important. And when you earn that trust, it goes a long way. And it's not a God, how many times did I have to give people tours when I was teaching at NYU, and a dad might say, so, what kind of job prospects does my son and or daughter get when they graduate? I'm like, well, there's no job career fair. They just go, hi, I'd like to get a job at that studio. Jobs like that aren't available. Full-time salary careers aren't, this is, just go to an office and get a job. There's a lot of hustling. There's a lot of connecting and networking. And I work in animation, I work in games, I work on my own music. I am working on some indie startups, both in games and in animation. Some things I get paid hourly, some things I get paid revenue based. Some things I'm not getting paid, but that's okay because I'm passionate about the project, and I really want to see it succeed. So that is very much par for the course. A lot of the students that I work with, they might focus on one thing, but they'll have different things they do as well. Maybe recording sound effects, maybe whatnot. So it's definitely something that find what you're passionate about, and that may change over time, and that's okay. But the evolution of you, there's only one you, and to find that best, most passionate version of you, you will be surprised where you find friends and success. So that's my answer to that question. Okay, wow, really, I've been talking for an hour. Any other questions? This is a super, super quick intro into all this. Is also as a segue, I do want to mention that I know we are working on doing a more of a hands-on class in recording and editing like this. We're maybe in January with the Help Network. That's maybe a smaller group and can maybe go over examples or things like that. So we're working on that kind of thing right now, and would love to see anyone and everyone who's interested in that. But this I try to give you guys a super quick, just about me into the process of dialogue, and then a little bit of dialogue editing live 101. And yeah, I do go a mile a minute, but it's something that I would love to slow down with everybody. Best ways to practice at home as you learn. What's great about a lot of plugins like RX and things like that is you get free trials, right? Find the resources that are available to you and understand what that is, especially with Audacity. You can record easily for free. Even on your phone, if you don't have a microphone, you can record. The voice memos is very quality, but if you use what's called the Dolby On app, it's a free app. It actually records your voice at lossless quality, so you get full 2448 wave file from your phone to practice, not necessarily as an actor, but also just to say, like, what does it sound like when I record something? So there's ways to practice it with trials and different types of software, and you'll find that whether it's Reaper, Logic, GarageBand, Pro Tools, it's still waveforms, it's still audio files, and so those tools and those skill sets are definitely transferable. I listen a lot. I play a lot of games and I listen to it and I take into account the acting, the performing, the quality, the way it was implemented. That's how I keep myself involved and keep myself up to date on everything. And it's something that helps me both because I'm passionate about this and I enjoy it, but also because it keeps me kind of up to date on what other people are working on and to keep up on being a better listener. So that's what I would say about that. Amazing. Let's see here. It's 7:02. Are there any other questions? Um, I'm going to also do this. I'm going to do some live typing right now and go like this. Thank you, everybody. I hope I helped you all. Like I said, it's definitely a crash course, and I'm going to go like this, share my screen, and here you go, professional notepad. If anyone has any questions or anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always happy to chat, and if you're stuck on something, you want me to listen to something, like, again, how do you get involved? How do you find success in the industry? I can also do this. It's amazing how friendships and relationships and collaboration is such a big deal. And that's what I love about what I get to do and the people I get to work with. So yeah, thank you so much, everybody. I think that's it. Oh, the Adobe app you mentioned. So it's called the Adobe On. Dolby, sorry, Dolby On, not Adobe, Dolby. So I'm gonna just go like this. If it, come on, camera, focus. See in the come on, back it up. Come on, maybe I have to lower the brightness. It's the Dolby. There we go. The Dolby On app. Oh, it's not really focusing, but the Dolby, Dolby, like Dolby Atmos, things like that. On. Yep, that's what I use to record on your phone. So, and then I'm going to answer one more question if everyone's okay. Yep, yes, mute if you did. So from what you answered me earlier about compression, once you compress a whole line, is the audio meant to be a bit louder? I'm still struggling how to stop peaking when I yell. Aha, yes. Trying to limit reverbs, etc. Okay, so I'll answer that question. I think that that'll be it. But basically, Jeff, I always try to record more quietly. That's why I have the minus 12 to 18 decibels. You want to give yourself the headroom so that when you record, you can always make it louder, right? Even if you're worried about noise floor, you can never make it quieter once it's distorted, but you can always make it louder. That's the nice thing about these digital zeros and ones, that you can make something louder. So that's where, look at your meters and see if it's hitting the red. Record quieter because you can always make it louder. I think that's the best way I can answer that. So thank you all so much. Yes. Let me put here. There you go. I put to host and panelist. So just my name, Matt Kulewicz @gmail.com, @Matt Kulewicz. There's only one of me. There's not 13 John Smiths, so I'm very lucky in that case. But thank you all for joining. I appreciate it. I hope you guys got something out of this. And I hope to see you all soon, and take care. And thank you, everybody. You guys are awesome. And yeah, you guys, everyone have a great night, and thank you so much.